we find ourselves in the middle of chapter 13. Chapter 12 defined basically what is a Beinoni, saying that there are two ways to judge a person. There are two ways to define a person. You have the person who is defined. You can define a person by their conduct. That's called the garments of the soul. Levushe hanefesh, their thought, their speech, and their deeds. And then you can define a person also by what the Alter Rebbe is going to call in this chapter the etzem, or the mehusvi atzmos hanefesh, more the essential pieces of the soul, and that is their emotions. The emotions of a person could be considered the essence of the soul. We discussed this in a previous lesson long ago. For this context, that's what we are going to refer to when we say the essence of the soul. The actual being, the soul itself, is the emotions, the internal workings of the person. When a person's internal workings are under the dominion of the Yetzer HaTov, the divine consciousness of the divine soul, that makes the person a tzaddik, because he only has any feelings. All of his feelings are directed towards Hashem. All his feelings are directed towards goodness. All his feelings are directed towards holy things. When you have a person who does not have such dominion and his emotions are focused towards all kinds of things, then that person could be categorized as a rasha. The exception is when such a person who has no such dominion over the feelings of his heart, the inner workings of his self, and he does not have them clearly directed towards holiness, still his behavior, his exterior parts, meaning his thought, speech, and action, are controlled and are under the dominion of the divine soul, then that person is called a Beinoni, because essentially he has the capacity to sin, but in practical terms, he has not sinned, and he does not sin, and he will not sin. That is called the optimal average human being. And in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe begins to tell us, basically, in short, there are three levels of Beinoni, and in each one, he still is called a Beinoni, even though you might be surprised. You might say, sometimes let's call this guy a rasha, and sometimes you say, let's call this guy a tzaddik. Why are we still calling him a Beinoni? And the Alter Rebbe, of course, is giving us the definitions of what is a Beinoni, and the instructional part comes later, but it's important to know exactly where we stand. So we continue. We discussed in the first part of this chapter that you have a person who he has no control over the emotions of his heart. His heart fires distracting thoughts into his mind about doing things that are permitted generally, but would be considered indulgences. Of course, the Beinoni does not struggle with any temptation to do something evil. Then he's truly a rasha. But a temptation to do something indulgent that is permissible, and the analogy we gave was to eat one more cupcake than is necessary, to eat one more donut than is necessary, to indulge. Yeah. Some of us are familiar with the concept. Such a Beinoni gets the thoughts from his nefesh habahamis, from the evils of his animal soul, into his mind, and right away he needs to push them away. In this case, how is he successful in pushing away the thoughts that come to him from the evils of the animal soul? It's only because Hashem is helping him. How is Hashem helping him? Hashem is helping him by giving additional light, additional strength, an advantage, a clear advantage for the divine soul over the animal soul. What's that advantage? Is that the divine soul comes with wisdom and the animal soul comes with foolishness, and wisdom has an advantage over foolishness, the way light has an advantage over darkness, that as soon as you turn it on, it chases the foolishness away. This, we pointed out, is different than the Beinoni we discussed in chapter 12. In chapter 12, we discussed the Beinoni who maintains control over his conduct, because the mind controls the heart, and the mind has frozen the animal soul's has muted the animal soul's microphone. Yeah, that Beinoni has control over his thoughts, and no thoughts enter his mind from the evils of the animal soul at all, even though the animal soul is robust and ready to desire all kinds of desires, all kinds of delights. But in that Beinoni, the thought never occurs to that Beinoni. Here, what we learned last time we met is that this Beinoni is suffering from suggestions coming from the evils of the animal soul. But Hashem is helping him in overcoming those suggestions. Now we understand why the Gemara said that the Beinoni is judged by two spirits, judged by two souls, as opposed to where in other cases you might say that somebody is ruled over by the spirit of folly, is controlled by a spirit of foolishness, or sometimes a person is taken over by a spirit of holiness. In the Beinoni's case, he's not taken over and he's not controlled. He's judged. That means you have two opinions. You have two voices in his head that are making suggestions, and neither one of them really controls him. Instead, there is a third judge, like you have in any court of three, where one says one opinion, the other says the other opinion, and the halacha, the conclusion, the verdict will be like the third opinion. And in this case, who is that third opinion? We said that's Hashem, who helps him out and gives him the strength to overcome his. And that's why he's called like a Rasha. Why are we comparing him to a Rasha? Let's say, first of all, why are we calling him like a Rasha? Because he is not a Rasha. He's only like a Rasha. Why is he like a Rasha? Because half of his person, half of his self, is the same as that of a Rasha. Remember, we broke the person into two parts. There is the essence of the person, which are the emotions and the intellect, and then there's the conduct of the person, the garments of the soul, thought, speech, and action. In one factor, this Beinoni is like the tzaddik, meaning his conduct is perfect. And in another factor, this Beinoni is like the Rasha, because his emotions and his intellect are not perfect. They are a mix, they are a blend. They are susceptible to the suggestions of the animal soul. He has the capacity to yearn for and lust after worldly pleasures, permitted but worldly. So, therefore, he is like the Rasha. This raises the question: why do we have to be so negative? He's also like a tzaddik, isn't he? Couldn't we say, even if the whole world says to you, "Oh, you're such a tzaddik," don't listen to them. Instead, say to yourself, "I'm only like a tzaddik. I'm not really a tzaddik. I'm like a tzaddik." Why does the guy have to say to himself, "I'm like a Rasha"? He's equal parts, like the tzaddik and like the Rasha. So why are we being so down on him? Why are we suggesting that he take a negative approach, a pessimistic approach? Let's learn. However, I wish I could tell you where we are. Chapter 13. We are on page, if you have a copy of the regular print of Tanya, it's on page Yud Ches, the first side, and it's like 2/3 the way down the page by the period. However, since the evils that are from the animal soul that live in the left side of the heart, Beinoni, in this guy called Beinoni, this optimal human being, who bitokva kittel dasai, the evils of the animal soul are as strong as they have ever been, and is capable of yearning and lusting after all of the delights of the physical world, and it has not been nullified by an overwhelming amount of goodness from the godly soul, and it has not been moved from its place at all. It just doesn't have any control, and it doesn't have the authority to to spread through the limbs of this person's body, who is preventing this Yetzer Hara? Who is preventing the evils of this animal soul from spreading into actual action, to impacting the Beinani's conduct? Who is preventing his expression? The Beinani? No, not the Beinani. Hashem is preventing it. Hashem has given the Beinani a special advantage, an extra strength for the divine soul over the animal soul. His inclination to do good just has an outright advantage, and that's a gift from Hashem. That's not by the power of the Beinani himself. Because Hashem is standing there to the right side of the Beinani, the Oizer, and helping him out, and shines extra light to the divine soul. Therefore, it is not correct to say that the Beinani is equal parts like the Tzaddik and equal parts like the Rasha. Why? Why would we say that he's like the Tzaddik? Because his conduct is perfect. To whose credit is that? If we're just looking at the Beinani by himself, if we take Hashem's help out of the equation, he is a Rasha, and he does not have the capacity to prevent the animal soul's evils from gaining expression in his body. So he's not equal parts like the Tzaddik and equal parts like the Rasha. No, he's primarily like the Rasha, and he's blessed by extra help from Hashem that he should maintain and control his conduct. Nikra ki Rasha. That's why he's called like a Rasha. Kemaimer Azal, as it says in Chazal, like we learned the Gemara in the first chapter. Even if the whole world says to you, Tzadikato, you're such a righteous man. Why should the world say to you, you're such a righteous man? Remember, we learned also at the beginning of Tanya that that's the way the world judges. The world can only judge by what it sees. And in the case of this Beinani, if you take a look at this Beinani, his conduct is perfect. He appears like a tzaddik. And you could assume and you could think that the evils of the animal soul were indeed overwhelmed and crowded out because of the overwhelming goodness of the divine soul, and that this person is in fact a tzaddik with no influence, suffering no influence from the animal soul at all. That's how the world judges. That's how the world measures, only by what is seen. And in fact, the heavenly court, although the heavenly court is privy to all kinds of secrets about the person, the heavenly court judges in a similar way. The heavenly court judges by what is seen, by what is measurable, by the conduct. How many good thoughts did you have compared to how many negative thoughts did you have? How many good words did you speak compared to how many negative words you spoke? How many good deeds did you do compared to how many negative deeds you did? That's how the heavenly court will judge. That's how judgment is made. So when the world says to you, and the world is not wrong, that's the way the world judges. It's a different scale than the way a person ought to judge themselves. Because we're not interested in getting credit, and we're not interested in getting a good reward at the end. That's not why we're in this. We are here to make our lives a pure and holy space in which Hashem himself can live. That's why we're here. And if we're not at 100%, then Hashem is not fully here. Then we're not bringing Hashem into the world. We're not making our portion of the world a proper home for Hashem. We're not doing our purpose. We're not fulfilling our mission. We are in this for Hashem's purpose. And Hashem's purpose is to have a home among us. So when we ask ourselves the question, am I a tzaddik, am I a Beinani, or am I a Rasha? The question is, how pure is my being? How clean of any evil is my being, inside and out? If the world sees perfect conduct, that's good, that's great, that's wonderful. Does that mean you're a tzaddik? We have to ask ourselves honestly. What would be the risk, let's say? What would be the risk of considering yourself a tzaddik at that point? What's the downside of taking the optimistic approach? After all, being optimistic could make you happy. What's the risk of being optimistic on this subject? So let's read. Now we understand the saying of the sages in the Gemara. Even if the world judges you correctly from their perspective, that you are righteous, you have to see yourself like a Rasha. Obviously, don't judge yourself incorrectly, saying you are a wicked man. That would be a lie, and lying doesn't help anybody. For this Beinani, when he's on this level, what is the level of this Beinani? His conduct is perfect, but it's only because Hashem is helping. But his conduct is perfect. That means he's not a Rasha. Ella yachazik atzmei lebeinani. Instead, what he has to do is he has to realize that he is a Beinani. He's the optimal average human being. It's dangerous to trust the world, to believe the world's judgment about him, who are suggesting based on evidence, based on your conduct, the world suggests that the evil in your soul has been overwhelmed and crowded out by the goodness, the overwhelming goodness from the divine soul. Because that's the level of a tzaddik, and you cannot accept that about yourself. So you must always assume about yourself, says the Alter Rebbe to this Beinani, that the evils with which you were born are as strong as they ever were, and they have not been weakened at all. They have not become weakened, and they have not departed mimenu from you, me'uma, even in the slightest. And in fact, we must assume that the evils of the animal soul over time have even become stronger, never mind not having left. The hemshech hazman, as time goes by in the life of a human being, when you engage the animal soul and the evils of the animal soul, the indulgent nature of the animal soul has been put to good use. That is a muscle that you have exercised. Whenever you eat, whenever you drink, and whenever you engage in any of the other worldly affairs that a human being has no choice but to engage in. Every time we do so, the indulgent nature of the animal soul is rewarded and strengthened, and it is just unavoidable. And this fact, the strengthening of the evils of the animal soul, is true for any Jew on any level and for any human being, including but not limited to Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Moses, on the mountain, Moshe Rabbeinu says, for 40 days I was on the mountain, lechem loy ochal, v'mayim loy shasisa. Lechem loy ochalti, v'mayim loy shasisi. I ate no bread and I drank no water for 40 days. Is he showing off? Is that like the joke where the poor man knocks on the door in Hollywood, and the lady of the house opens the door, and the poor man says, "Please, miss, give me some. Please, miss, please. I haven't eaten in 3 days." And the Hollywood lady says, "Oh, I wish I had such self-control." Is Moshe Rabbeinu showing off? I didn't eat for 40 days, and the people said, "Oh, I wish I had such self-control." No, certainly not. He's giving us a lesson in how we're supposed to approach the question of purity. Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the Jewish people, in order for me to receive the Torah and to be a proper conduit for the holiness that Hashem is giving to you through me, I could not indulge my animal soul even for the basic human necessities of eating and drinking. Because every time we engage the animal soul for eating and drinking, we reward its indulgent nature, we encourage its indulgent nature, and we strengthen its indulgent nature. And that cannot be avoided. And that's why even the greatest tzaddik has some atoning to do in order to pass from this world, has some cleansing to do in order to pass from this world into the world of souls. the fact of living on earth in a world that is a mixture of good and evil leaves each and every person with some damage. Yeah. Now, we have discussed here two kinds of Beinani. We discussed a Beinani who has control over his thoughts, and the voice of the evils of the animal soul never is heard in the conscious mind of this Beinani. Why? Because Moyach Shalit al Halev, because his mind is controlling his heart, and he maintains control of which interests are allowed to be pursued by his own heart. That's a very powerful Beinani. Then we learned about a Beinani who is not so strong. And he does suffer the opinions of the animal soul, but it's because Hashem's helping him. Hashem gives him the extra strength. Hashem gives extra strength to the divine soul over the animal soul, that this Beinani is successful and never succumbing to the suggestions of the animal soul. Now the Alter Rebbe says, but there's even a third level of tzaddik. There's even a third level of Beinani, and he also is only a Beinani and not a tzaddik. Even a person who is his sole interest is learning Torah. He loves to learn Torah. A whole day long, he's yearning, when can I get back to learning Torah? And when he is learning Torah, he's doing it not for his own self and not for any ulterior motives like we discussed in other places. This guy's for real. He's honest, he's earnest, he's learning Torah because through that he connects his soul to Hashem. In other words, previously we could say about the other Beinani that we learned, he really has no feeling. He really has no emotional attachment to Hashem. He's committed. His mind is in the right place. His heart hasn't come along with him yet. That's why he's not a tzaddik. Because he hasn't corralled his emotions and brought them into the picture of serving Hashem. So then, that might lead one to think that a Beinani who succeeds in generating emotion towards Hashem, desire and yearning towards something holy, maybe he is a tzaddik. Maybe that is evidence that he has crowded out all the evils of the animal soul and that he has made them disappear by bringing out the overwhelming goodness of the divine soul. Says the Alter Rebbe, that is also not evidence of being a tzaddik. Even this guy, for whom Torah is his only interest, and when he's learning Torah, he's doing it for the right reasons, to connect his soul to Hashem. Ein zu hoichacha klal. This is no evidence at all that the evil was dislodged from its place in the left side of the heart. In other words, this is no evidence at all that this guy's animal soul is purified and has no urge to do evil and has no indulgent inclination. Elo rather, yochel, it's possible, that the essence of this person, again, in this context, when the Alter Rebbe says the essence of the person, it means his thoughts, his intellect and his emotion. It could be that on an essential level, on an intellect and emotional level, the animal soul is as strong as ever, and he has firm residence in the left side of the heart. It's just that his garments, the thought, speech, and action of the animal soul, are not able, they don't have power and authority to clothe themselves and gain expression in the mind of the person, where he would be able to. That's where, if the animal soul was capable of thinking, if he would gain access to the mind, he would cause the person to think indulgent thoughts. He also doesn't have access to the mouth, where if he did have access to the mouth of the person, that is when the animal soul would say indulgent words, permitted but indulgent. And the hands, he also does not have access to the hands or the other limbs of the body, where he would be able to enact. He would be able to act on his indulgent inclinations. Why does he not have? Why does he not have access? Mibnei Hashem. It's also because of Hashem. Because Hashem has orchestrated the creation of the world It's just that his garments, namely the thought, speech, and action of the animal soul, they cannot be clothed, they cannot gain access to the mind, where the animal soul would think indulgent thoughts. It also cannot gain access to the mouth, where the animal soul would say indulgent things. It also cannot gain action to the hands, where the animal soul would do indulgent things. Or v'shari every aguf, for the other limbs of the body. Why is he not able to gain any access of Hashem? That's also because Hashem. That's also not due to the Beinani himself. Because Hashem naturally gives dominion to the mind over the heart. That is the nature of the human being. Your mind rules your heart. And therefore, nefesh elikis, the divine soul shebemoyach, that is in the mind, his natural habitat is the mind. Mashelas bi'ir ketana rules over the small city, the entire body, every aguf kulam, each and every limb. If the animal soul has if the divine soul has constant use of the mind, which naturally it should, naturally it could, and that's where the Alter Rebbe is saying words of encouragement to every human being. Realize that the natural habitat of the divine soul is the mind, and you always have access to perfect self-control when you realize that your better self is in your mind, and that naturally the mind rules the heart. If only you could rehearse whatever kind of thought processes that we have to develop so that we always end up doing the right thing. It's very possible, and it's very near to us. But again, that's not by our credit. That's not to our credit. It's not because we have done something magnificent and chased the evils of our animal soul away. Rather, it's by the nature that Hashem has created, has implanted in us, that our minds rule over our hearts. And since the divine soul's primary influence is in the mind, therefore it can control that its will alone should be expressed throughout the body. What are the wishes? What are the thought, speech, and action of a divine soul? Of course, these are thoughts of Torah and mitzvahs, words of Torah and mitzvahs, and the actions of Torah and mitzvahs. And still, that's no reason to assume that in this particular Beinani, who loves to learn Torah, and he learns Torah all day long, and he yearns to learn Torah every moment that he isn't learning Torah, no reason to assume that the evils of his animal soul are properly dominated by his divine soul. Because the only time you can say that the evils of the animal soul are properly and truly dominated by the goodness of the divine soul is when the divine soul loves Hashem so strongly and so intensely that it leaves no room even for the evils of the animal soul to have a place to live in the physiology of the human being. That means where the love of Hashem is so strong and overwhelming and it pours out from the right side of the heart into the left side of the heart. In other words, it occupies every possible, I don't know what the science of this is, but people can like many things. However, a person who truly loves one thing, if it's a true love for one thing, then opposing things cannot be loved. An obvious and easy example, I enjoy sports. I do, but I don't love a particular team. And therefore, I enjoy any game. If it's a good game, I enjoy watching, I enjoy hearing, I enjoy the highlights. If I would love one team, I would have to hate the primary opponents. So if I were a true Clevelander, I would have to hate the Steelers. I don't. Because I don't love the Cleveland team. It's not a true love. If I were a true fan of the teams of Minnesota, I would have to hate the teams of Chicago and Milwaukee and Atlanta. I don't, because it's not a true love. This Beinani is constantly focused intellectually on Hashem. And that's why he's always busy doing the right thing. And that's why, even though he has a feeling for learning Torah and he loves it so much and he yearns for it, that does not mean that his love for Hashem is true, leaving no room for any opposing interest. Kiyim, this means that this Beinani also, just like we learned at the beginning of this chapter, just like we learned at the end of chapter 12, this Beinani also is capable of such an intense love that will push out foreign interests only in times of unique inspiration. For example, only at times when love for Hashem is revealed in his heart, on special times, like during davening, when he has invested and meditated and contemplated and focused and generated a feeling of love for Hashem, or similar times. Now let's ask the question. We just realized now that it is possible for a Beinani to experience such a love for Hashem that foreign interests are pushed out, that foreign interests are crowded out. Should we say that at that time he's a tzaddik? There is a chassid called Kushia Lepler. Kushia Lepler, his friends called him, and we discuss him often because he is the paradigm of a chassid that worked on himself and transformed himself from something unfinished to something quite beautiful and quite finished. One time he did it the wrong way, so to speak, and one time he did it the right way. When he was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, he came to the Alter Rebbe and he said, Rebbe, I can't take it anymore. And in Yiddish he said, Hak mir up dem linken Zeit. Amputate my left side. By which he meant, take away my Yetzer Hara. I can't take it anymore. I don't want to struggle against the evils of the animal soul anymore. And the Alter Rebbe recited a verse from the Torah for him. And from then on, Rabbi Kusiel Lepler would vacillate between Beinani and Tzaddik. And you could see when he was the Beinani and when he was the Tzaddik. The Hasidim gave him no respect for this, even though he was a Tzaddik, or at least the Beinani, because he got it for free. And we don't respect what you did. We don't respect high levels that you got for free. We respect hard work. Well, in the next generation, he went to the Mittler Rebbe, the son of the Alter Rebbe, and he said to the Mittler Rebbe, your father saved me from my Yetzer Hara. Now I need you to give me the ability to understand the teachings of Chassidus, because I'm having a hard time, I'm struggling. And the Mittler Rebbe said, sorry, buddy, this time you're going to have to work for it. Review, 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 and eventually it'll come to you. Nothing can stand in the way of strong will. So that's what he did. For a very long time, he focused all his energy on learning, on studying, and he achieved a tremendous level of understanding of the deepest teachings of Hasidus. And for that, he is very respected and tremendously honored. But let's go back to the first step, yeah? We just now described the Beinani who, when he davens and he has this special inspiration, then the evils of the animal soul are in fact pushed out. Should we say that every top level Beinani is this kind of split personality, this kind of schizophrenia like Rabbi Kushya Lepler? Sometimes a tzaddik, sometimes a Beinani. Is that the new internal dynamic of this Beinani? When he davens, he's a tzaddik, and when he's done davening, he's a Beinani. Is that a correct assessment? Says the Alter Rebbe, even on such occasions, it is not anything more than control. This reflects the verse of Yitzchak's blessing to Esav, when it says that the two nations, the nation of Yaakov and the nation of Esav, will struggle against each other. That when one rises, the other has to fall. And when but throughout it, all that time, the other always has the capacity to regroup and rise again. The point is that the Yetzer Hara, internally we have the same struggle. The nation of Yaakov represents the divine soul. The nation of Esav represents the animal soul. And just because the divine soul has gained the upper hand does not take away from the animal soul the capacity to regroup and rise again. That the divine soul is capable of gaining control and dominion, forcing its will on the animal soul. Why? By drawing on the source of strength. What is the source of strength? Bina. Do you remember, do you have it in your head, the picture of the thing that people call the tree of life? All the Sfiras, how they line up. Chochma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Yisrael, Malchus. Can you picture it? So let's look down the left column. On the left column, you have Bina, Gvura, Hoid. That's the left column. And the way it works is that on this column, whatever is lower unfolds from the thing that came before it, is rooted in the thing that came above it on that chart. Strength, Gvura, comes from Bina. Practically speaking, what are we talking about? The Beinani has used his mind, meditating, contemplating, practiced thought, practiced mental responses to every situation, to any situation, so that he will never allow a foreign interest into his conscious life. He's using his Bina, he's using the power of his mind to gain and to maintain control, not only over the thought, speech, and action of the animal soul, but even to one degree or another over the emotions of the animal soul. Giving them no room, giving them no opportunity. How through his contemplating the greatness of the infinite one Hashem, he uses the strength of his mind to develop a tremendous burning love for Hashem, like a raging fire in the right side of his heart. And when that happens, the evils that are alive and well in the left side of the heart, they are subdued, but only subdued. Whereas subdued is not the same as disappeared. Ella b'tzadik, only in a tzaddik has the evil disappeared. Shenemar boi v'libi cholal b'kirbi. It says about the tzaddik that my heart is empty within me. What does it mean, my heart is empty within me? It's like the tzaddik has a big blinking sign outside his heart that says vacancy, because one of the rooms is empty. There used to be an occupant there. There used to be a Yetzer Hara in there. Now it's not there anymore. Why? Because it's been pushed out. In the tzaddik, the evils of the animal soul have been pushed out of the heart, and now the heart is vacant from any influence of the animal soul. What does that mean? How does that express itself in the conscious life of the tzaddik? Vehu moyes bera. The tzaddik has no capacity to entertain foreign interests that oppose his love for Hashem. And therefore, when some evil is presented to him, he hates it. He despises it. He hates it with the utmost hatred and disgust. That is if he's a perfect tzaddik, of course. Or maybe a lesser degree of hatred and disgust if he is in the category of tzaddik viraloi or tzaddik she'enoi gomer, the incomplete tzaddik. But certainly there is no room for foreign interests in the heart of a tzaddik. Aval bebeinani, whereas in the case of the beinani, what happened to his animal soul? Has he been chased away? Is there no longer any space for him in the conscious life of this beinani? Not really. Hu al derech mashal ke'adam sheyashem. Rather, the evils of the animal soul is like a person who is sleeping. That any moment he can awaken from his sleep and come back to work. So too in the Beinani, when his heart is on fire with love for Hashem, and his heart is filled with emotions because he's davening. So the animal soul is basically taking a nap. but he hasn't gone and he's not diminished. As soon as he's done davening, he's capable of regrouping and rising again. What would happen if the Beinani would make this mistake and assume that he was in fact a tzaddik? A whole day, I'm interested only in Torah. When I daven, my heart is lit up on fire with love for Hashem. Maybe the world is right. Maybe I am a tzaddik. Maybe I have chased the evils of the animal soul away so that they should never return. What's the risk? There is a grave and present danger in that. What is it? That you stop fighting. You haven't given up the fight. You think there is no longer a fight. And that's when the Yetzer Hara will blindside you. The Lochen, and therefore, Rabbi, in his great wisdom, considered himself no more than a Beinani. In other words, Rabbi, the great tzaddik, kept up the fight. He never stopped fighting. Any evidence of evil, any evidence of indulgence, any evidence of selfish, self-oriented feelings, thoughts, activities, possibilities, he never stopped fighting. After Lepasik Pumim Megirsa, even though we know about him that his mouth never ceased from reciting words of Torah, and that his heart was directed in one direction only. He wanted to learn Torah. With yearning and pining, and another way of saying the same thing, and a heart that was reaching out, a soul that was reaching out for Hashem, thirsting for Hashem all day long, with tremendous love, like it during the time of davening. All day long, he felt so inspired at the way that the Beinani on the highest level can feel during davening. Instead of assuming that he was a tzaddik and that the evils of the animal soul had departed from him, instead, he took the responsible route. And he said to himself, I'm a Beinani. The evils of my animal soul are merely fallen silent, but at any moment they can regroup and rise again. The fact that I'm overcome with love for Hashem throughout the day is because a whole day long I am engaged in a profound relationship with Hashem, like on the level of davening. But if I would stop this for a minute, I would slide right back into the hands of the animal soul. As the Chazal say, it is possible for a human being. It's not probable. It's not a realistic probability. It is possible for a person to feel overwhelming love for Hashem throughout the entire day if he could just keep that process of davening going. For most human beings, that's not possible. For Rabbi, he assumed about himself that it is possible, and that he was fulfilling the statement of Chazal that says, if only a Jew could daven all day long, if only a human being would be on the level of prayer, so inspired and so focused as one is during prayer, if only we could be that way throughout the day. Okay, so Rabbi assumed about himself that that's what he was doing. Because the great risk of making the assumption that you are a tzaddik and letting your guard down, the great risk is that in fact you would fall back into the hands of the Nefesh HaBahamis. From here we see, basically, that there could even be so many levels of Beinani. We have the Beinani who survives as a Beinani because Hashem helps him by giving the divine soul wisdom and the animal soul foolishness. We have the Beinani who actually has achieved the level of Beinoni by his own work. He's contemplated, he's meditated, he has gained access to the deepest places of his heart and soul, and he is in control. He is dictating what thoughts and what feelings, what interests will be allowed into his conscious life. That's by his own work. And sometimes you have a Beinoni who maintains tremendous control, but it's only because Hashem blessed him with the regular, average human nature that the mind rules over the heart. And sometimes you have a Beinoni who is on fire all day long because he's constantly on the level of davening. As the Alter Rebbe once told the Chassid, there are 400 levels of Beinoni. 400 must be a general number because every individual Beinoni is going to be on a slightly different level. But there are 400 iterations of Beinoni, never mind the individual particulars. From here, we learn the following. Beinoni is a very sophisticated and not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. Being that we are still in the definitions stage of Tanya, it's good and encouraging for us to know this, because previously we have seen that the Beinoni is a particular set of values and a particular set of achievements, and it's daunting and it's overwhelming and it might be discouraging. And the Alter Rebbe is saying, never mind that. Beinonis also come in a wide array of varieties. And there's a variety that fits you. One of these iterations of Beinoni is right for you. You don't have to be Kushya Lepler. You could be you. There is a Beinoni suit that is just your size. Thank you for joining.